Welcome to The Feminine Frequency, a podcast designed to awaken your feminine energy, elevate your confidence, and embody your authentic expression. I'm your host, Amy Natalie, women's empowerment coach, feminine embodiment guide, and author of The Feminine Way. Each week, you'll receive a new episode filled with feminine wisdom, inspiration, and practical tools to remind you of the power that already lives inside of you. Make sure to hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode, and go to the link below this video to download your free Empowered Feminine Morning Ritual. Ready to dive in? Let's do this, sister. Hello, Ruth, and welcome to The Feminine Frequency. I am really excited to be here with you today. I tried some of your classes this past week on your app, and so I'm excited to dive into more of like the philosophy and the methodology and really get to know you more as the creator of this amazing platform. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah, I wanted to start by hearing a little bit about your exercise journey. And I know that so many of our listeners are in the exploration of really getting out of the old paradigm of fitness where it's like you got to like work so hard and you have to like burn yourself out, and then that's the only way that you're going to get the results. And I know that there's a different way, and so many women are looking for that and ready for that. So I'd love for you to share about your journey, your own fitness journey, to start us off.
I love this question so much. I also want to just preface this by saying that when I was first teaching Pilates, because all of that same rhetoric was what I was taught, like I've said so many things in classes 5 years ago that I would never say now. So even my journey as an instructor has changed a lot in the last couple of years. But personally, I was never a gym lover. Like I would try to go to the gym and I thought, I'll just get on the treadmill. I avoided weights at all costs, and I was doing dance as my main form of movement, which I have always loved. And the fitness, I never understood why the fitness space didn't speak to me. But the more I've learned as I've gotten older, I'm 31 now, I have realized why I was kind of repelled by it because of all the messaging, the toxic messaging that was constantly coming our way. It's like you couldn't go into a space without someone either commenting on your body or saying like, even a compliment on your body somehow would make me feel uncomfortable in a fitness space. And I think the figuring out what made me fall in love with dance is what's really informed my practice now with teaching Pilates and the movement we do on RPS. It's meant to be playful, it's meant to be fun. We don't talk about body aesthetics. I also want to add that if someone has a physical goal or an aesthetic goal, more power to them. I cheer on any goal that someone has. I want to help them achieve it. But I think personally for me, I'm not motivated by the those old fitness paradigms that you're talking about. I find them really like repellent and unsustainable. So yeah, I think my journey has really been as trying to pull the love I've had for dance my whole life, and especially as a child, like even just the act of swinging, like I always would sit on swing sets and swing back and forth, and something about that rhythmic movement was like really satisfying to me. So a lot of it is just trying to get back to that, my inner child, healing my inner child, and sharing that joy I've always had for movement.
I can so relate to that, being a dancer as a young child and really wanting to come back to that, coming back to that joy, coming back to that connection with music and moving freely. And I know that you have such a deep connection with music as well, right? Where it's like, oh, it just like speaks to our souls. And I think being
Yeah.
able to bring in some play and some lightness into physical movement is so helpful, because sometimes we can get into that like serious mode and where it's just all about like, the goals that you're wanting to reach, whether that's how much weight you're lifting or how your body looks, and it really takes the fun out of it. So I'd love for you to describe a little bit about like your style of teaching Pilates and some of the unique aspects of what you infuse into your teaching.
Absolutely. So when I started off teaching, I was a classical Pilates instructor, comprehensively trained. And I think it's important to acknowledge too that, I mean, classical Pilates was created by a man named Joseph Pilates 100 years ago. So there's aspects of Pilates that I adore and love and will always be like part of my movement DNA. At the same time, there's way more to movement too. And I know that Pilates is so hot right now and it's in my name on my Instagram. And there is a part of me that's trying to move a little bit away from just classical Pilates, and understanding that like the person who created Pilates was an imperfect human with, their own ideas about people. If you start to really dig into Joseph Pilates, you'll see that he had some messaging too that wasn't great. He thought every American was lazy, and he had just like a lot of opinions about the way everyone's bodies looked. That could be a whole other podcast episode, like breaking down Joe and his imperfections. But what he's added to the work is to the movement world is really powerful. And I think one of the biggest things he added was it's a prison workout. I don't know if everyone realizes that Pilates is literally, he created it in prison, like in an internment camp in a small space. So just that aspect of it being accessible and in a small space is what inspires me so much, especially with my online workouts. I was teaching at really high-end boutiques. I was teaching at Equinox and at a private studio. And I just felt like I looked around and I just felt like this isn't what Joe wanted, even though like not everything is for Joe. But I was like, I don't think Joseph Pilates ever intended for Pilates to be how it is portrayed right now. So a lot of what I do is actually like infusing the classical system back into Pilates that's a little bit been lost, especially in like the Pilates talk sphere where it looks like Pilates is a bunch of donkey kicks when that was never ever in the system at all. So part of my mission was kind of bringing back the classical aspects of Pilates. But at the same time, as I was moving that way and it was making me really, really strong, I felt like I still was missing the piece that was that dancer in me, the part of me that really wanted to move a tiny bit more with a tiny bit more fluidity, and also that wanted to build some muscle. And in order to build muscle, you're going to hit a wall with mat Pilates, where your muscles have had their stimulus and are as strong as they're going to get from them. So incorporating heavier weights, and we don't use anything super heavy on our PS. My heaviest weight is 25 pounds. And then adding a bit more of like a sensual take, as well as some dancing, is really what I like to infuse. So we're doing mobility, we're doing primal movement, we're doing weights, and we're doing classical Pilates. And it's sort of this amalgamation of everything I've learned as a mover and my favorite ways to move. And my mission is kind of finding women and folks who also like to move that way, and finding if they enjoy moving the way that I like to move, then I think it's the perfect place for them because we do a little bit of everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I now see why you're meant to be on the podcast even more because this is such a great example of the combination of the masculine and feminine energies when it comes to exercise, right? Because if you go too far into the feminine and you're not actually strengthening your muscles enough and you're not exerting any effort, then you're not going to grow and you're not going to get the strength that you need. But then if you're too far into that masculine, it takes out like the fun and the play and the pleasure, and it actually I feel
Totally.
like takes us out of our body. Like it doesn't actually help us to feel more connected and more sexy. It makes us feel more masculine as women, which I think when we look at the trends in our lifetime, there was bodybuilding was what people used to aspire to. And like for me, when I look at bodies like that now, like it makes me sad because I'm like, wow, like the level of which like someone wants to change their body to make it look a certain way usually means that they're not happy with what they currently have. And I get that there's an aspect of competition and that it is really impressive to like really apply yourself to something like
Yeah.
that, right? Like there's a celebration in
Yeah.
that for people who commit to something and go for it. And I think that
Yeah.
we're really looking at changing the narrative around how we as women see our bodies and how we move our bodies. So I love what
Yeah.
you're up to in the world.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You just had me think of there's such a nuance here because I think we'll look at bodybuilders who are extremely regimented. The amount of discipline and strict food intake and counting everything that goes into looking that way is so immense. It takes up your entire life. And then we have on the other side folks who think that if they pick up a 5 pound weight, they're going to look like a bodybuilder. You know what I mean? And I think we're trying to find like, and I appreciate the art of bodybuilding. I think that's definitely there's an art to it. But yeah, I want to speak to the folks who want to be somewhere in the middle where they want to be strong. They know the importance of muscle mass for your longevity. And if you don't know, let me just tell you right now, like building strength is one of the best things you can do for your longevity. And as we are, sometimes I like to say getting younger. It's like as we get older, it's like sometimes we're just getting younger, getting back in touch with a younger side of ourselves. But it's essential, and I don't want anyone to be afraid of what a weight will do to their body, and instead, it's actually very good for you. Now, again, I don't pick up anything heavy, and I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary to be lifting extremely heavy unless that's a goal that you have. But yeah, I just wanted to add that because sometimes I think there's a nuance there that can be blurry just from all the messaging that's on social media right now. So.
Yeah, thank you for adding that in. I'm curious about your experience with your sensuality. I know that you have your own unique methodology, the Sensulates, and I love that you incorporate that. And I know that so many women want to be in touch with that part of themselves, but there can be a block for them or it can feel uncomfortable, especially if they haven't been connected to their bodies in that way. So, love to hear a little bit more about your relationship with your own sensuality and like why you've decided to infuse it into your work.
It just makes me so happy to talk about this topic. So thank you. Like it just is, it makes me really happy. So I'm glad I have this opportunity. Growing up, and this is my personal experience, and I have folks who do my videos and my classes who have a different experience. So I can speak a little bit to that after. But my experience was that almost right away when I hit puberty, I was being called sexy. And I remember feeling a lot of shame around it because I was like, but my friends are being called beautiful and cute and pretty, and I'm sexy. I must be worse. I must be less than. And I think that really made me feel a lot of shame that I carried throughout my life. And at the same time, that same shame and like it led me into like some, just to be honest, and I don't want to trauma dump on anyone, but like some toxic, like abusive situations. And I think all of that like really made me feel so ashamed of this side of me, a more sensual side of me. And I kind of would repel from it. Then as I got older and recently in the last couple of years, I started to realize that I have like it's actually a superpower of mine to connect people to their sensuality, to embrace the sexy side of themselves that either they've never been introduced to or that they also felt ashamed about and that they didn't really want to share again outwardly. Like maybe they know inside that they have this side of themselves that's really sexy and fierce and happy, and but at the same time they're not ready to put it out there. So starting Sensualities was really me kind of breaking down that wall and saying, I'm ready to put this out there. And I'm hoping that the bravery, this step that I'm taking, will also help other women feel brave enough to even just press play on a video and do it in the privacy of their own room, which is challenging. And I don't take that lightly at all, that they're even willing to just do that privately because we get so shut down of our sensuality that even just doing it in a space we feel a little embarrassed, and it's for who, it's just all this messaging that we've received and all the shame that we carry. I also want to speak to the folks who have never felt sexy and who have never been called sexy or who just feel like they don't even have a part of themselves that is sexy. And I'm here to tell you that you certainly do. And that if it's something that you want, it's teachable. Repetition, practice is everything. I'd also like to mention just something that I just received a message yesterday from one of my members who's been doing my Sensuality classes like religiously, and she's having the best sex of her life. It's so cool to hear that and just to know that this is actually impacting folks in their sex life, which is a huge part of our health, right? Having a healthy sex life. So um, yeah, that's Sensualities. It's the thing that makes me the most excited right now. It's the thing I'm working on. As I mentioned, I'm sort of moving away from strict Pilates and more into what feels the best in my body. And right now that's Sensualities. So yeah.
I love that this feels like such an extension of your soul and what you're here to teach. And like you said, it's one of your superpowers, and it's really giving other women permission to do the same, right? It's giving other women permission to explore their bodies. And just like you said, I've taught so many embodiment sessions where women say like, oh my God, no one was in the room, but I'm still afraid. Like, what if someone were to see me dancing or moving in this way? And it is so deeply programmed. On the one hand, we have religious programming and societal programming that tells us that our sensuality and our sexuality is inappropriate, it's too much, it's dirty, it's slutty, it's wrong. And then on the other hand, we get hypersexualized when we are being sensual, or even when we're not being sensual. When you're walking down the street, then you have like
Yeah.
catcalls and you have all these people commenting on your body. And just what you said earlier, like, don't comment on other people's bodies. Like, that's just a thing that in our culture that we have that to me is so not okay, and it perpetuates. Even if someone has lost weight, it's just like bringing awareness to focus on the body. And maybe you might want to say to her instead, like, wow, you look so radiant, like you look so healthy, like I'm so proud of you, right? Something like that, versus us being so focused on what people look like.
Yeah. Even I will say too, from through an eating disorder lens, and I've never had struggled with ED, thank God, but I have very close family and friends who have. And actually, even saying you look healthy can be triggering for someone who is struggling with ED. So it's very challenging, right, to be sensitive to all the different um, things that can trigger someone. But I think the spirit of what you're saying is so spot on. Like, I think as a whole, if we could all just never comment on someone's body again, it would do us all a lot better. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. And it is
Yeah,
so
of
true
course.
that this is a really sensitive topic, and so many women struggled with disordered eating, with body dysmorphia, and so much of it goes undiagnosed because in our culture it's normal to diet or it's normal to overexercise. And it's something that I think we need to bring more awareness to. And really, in my experience, it is a deeper, both like emotional and spiritual healing journey when we are at war with our bodies. And I feel like
Yeah.
doing movement like what you're offering is really about bringing women back home to their bodies, and more so focusing on like, how does this feel in my body versus how does this look
That
for
part.
someone
Yeah.
else, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
this isn't for entertainment for other people. It's like, oh, okay. Oh, this feels kind of awkward, or oh, this feels kind of like fun, and this feels good
Yeah.
in my body. So, yeah, I think you've mentioned a few times about like you created this because this is about the movement that's feeling good in your body. And I think if there's one message from today, it's that it's like doing exercise that feels good for your body, right?
Yeah. And I think you also had me think of something when you mentioned the way that we're also over sexualized and when we're out in the walking down the street or in any situation, if you have a social media presence and people comment on your body and say disgusting things, because that's very real online. Part of this practice too is taking that power back. And there's something really empowering about saying, like, actually, I don't care what you have to say about the way that I look and my sexuality, but what do I want to say about my sexuality, and how can I communicate to my body that I'm grateful for this body, that my body's on my side, and that we're working together like this? Because, like you said, a lot of times it feels like we're up against our body, and that's another message I really would like to emphasize is that your body wants you to heal. Your body is on your side, and trusting that is so hard. And feeling grateful for for your own body is really challenging too. But again, it's a practice where we're every single day showing up and just practicing a radical act of self-love that is movement. And every single time you do that, you get a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And you start to believe that. You start to believe it a little more. Oh, maybe I do feel more grateful for my body today. Maybe it is on my side. And like those tiny wins are everything to me.
Mm, yeah, so powerful. Reclaiming your power, reclaiming your sexuality, your sensuality, right? Like it not being about other people, but it being about you and how you feel in your body and how it makes you feel confident and powerful, right? And as we start to shift that narrative and as we start to shift our relationship with our body, because it is a relationship with our body, and when we start to see it as that, we're like, oh, I'm not speaking very nicely to my body, or I'm not treating my body with respect, right? The way that I'm moving or not moving my body, or the things that I'm putting in my body, right? So when we start to really see it as a relationship, we can create that harmony and we can really start to heal our relationship with our body, instead of like we've been talking about, where you're at war or there's a disconnect where you feel really disconnected from your body.
And a big part of that too, right, is just starting to become more aware of the thoughts that you have about yourself and the internal dialogue that's going on. Because I don't I don't expect someone to press play on a video and instantly be like, oh, like I'm amazing. I feel so good. I expect them to notice what's coming up for them. Where are the moments where they're thinking, oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I don't look good doing this. Oh, I'm awkward. All those thoughts, acknowledging them is part of the practice too. It's like, oh, I didn't realize how much I was like talking down to myself. So even just becoming a little bit more aware of that dialogue that's happening internally. Another thing I want to mention is that I have a trauma informed certification now, and I'm really interested in um, making sure that I create a space that is as safe and empowering as possible for folks who have experienced trauma. I talked about taking the power back. A lot of times when we've gone through something traumatic, we feel like we weren't in control and that we didn't have any power. We were powerless. So stepping back into that power can feel uncomfortable, and sometimes it can trigger something, a release of some kind. Oftentimes it can be tears. That's what can happen a lot with some of my videos, is like just an emotional release, which I think is incredibly powerful and is great. Um, but I also want folks to know that if some other reaction comes up, that this the space that they're in is safe. I'm never going to say something, or I'm going to do my very best to make sure that the language that I use is as neutral as possible to make sure that you feel really safe in this space. But knowing too that if you've been through trauma, some stuff is going to come up through this work. It is your mind and body are so connected, and the body keeps score, right? Like it remembers. So bringing up some of those feelings and going through that discomfort and that friction is part of it too.
Yes, it's amazing what happens even in just, a small practice where I invite clients to put their hands on their body or to touch their body, just really like lovingly and even sensually. And even in that, even when women give themselves a hug, like that can bring up feelings of, oh, I don't feel worthy of love. I don't feel worthy of touch. Or it can bring up past trauma, right? And so I love that you have taken the step to become trauma informed and to really be mindful of that, because all of us have experienced some form of trauma, whether it's small t trauma or big T trauma. And I think specifically working with women and their bodies, like as we get more into our bodies, like more stuff is going to come up. And that is the power of embodiment work, is that we are actually allowing ourselves to feel and to heal what's there instead of distracting ourselves or staying in our mind and kind of analyzing our experience versus actually feeling it. So, what would you
Mm,
say
mhm.
to someone if they were, taking one of your classes and there is emotion that comes up, or maybe they even go into a little bit of a freeze response? Like, what would
Mm.
you recommend in that moment that they can do to really support themselves?
Love this question. And I also love that I can see just how in tune you are to all of it as well. And the fact that you've also given folks a space to feel really safe with you, where it's like just doing something like touching their own body elicits that response. And I think a lot of that comes down to you and the attention and care and empathy that you have. So I just wanted to acknowledge that really quick. But if something were to come up in a video, my advice, and it's something I try to repeat through classes, to make sure you do what feels right to you. So it could be like, one of my sayings too is, when in doubt, you freestyle it out. I think that can also be um, applied here, where it's like, if there's a movement that makes you feel unsafe in any way, you can stop. You have permission. I am never going to shame someone for changing a movement, taking a break, lying down. Close your eyes, listen to your body's response in that moment, and allow it to, in a way that feels, wherever you're at, if allowing yourself to feel it to an extent that you feel safe to do so, I think is fabulous. And just letting yourself feel that way, and also not trying to force yourself into something that doesn't feel safe to you, whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally. That's really important to me. And I often provide options. And I think it's just sort of my way of continually putting out this message, like, you are empowered to make the choices that feel right to your body. If something doesn't feel right, you change it. If something is feels really good, you log that in your brain and you're like, oh, this is what I can come back to if I have these moments. That would be my
Mm.
advice.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think there is something really beautiful about having the experience of working out in your own home, in your own room where there aren't other people. Because I know, even for myself early on, like if I'm in a Pilates class in a group and the instructor's like, go harder, or there's a certain amount of reps that you're supposed to do, and then you're the only one in the class who's not doing it because you're listening to your body. In the past, that would make me really uncomfortable. Now I'm like, of course I'm going to stop and listen to my body if that's not feeling good for me. But it can be harder, and we have so much messaging around overriding what our body's cues are. It's like, oh, just keep pushing, keep going. And really, that's not what's best for our bodies. Listening to our bodies, there's a time and a place to challenge ourselves, for sure. And I love this recommendation of like, you can modify, you can pause, you can back off, like really taking that signal from your body, like, oh, there's something here that I get to be with. And like, this is not a time to override that message.
Yeah, and it still can happen. Like, there can be times where you realize you overdid it, and like, and it's just that relationship building, that constant practice of listening to your body. I'm really glad you mentioned that about being in a studio space where you feel like you need to keep up, or that you don't want to be the only one who's not doing something at a certain level. And I think that is really a powerful part of practicing at home, is knowing like, oh, I could literally lay here, wiggle like a worm and cry, and no one would judge me. It's just me in my face. Yeah, that helps a lot for me.
Yeah, I started doing at-home workouts, as did most people, during the pandemic. And I used to be an athlete, and I then transitioned into, and I still consider myself an athlete, but I transitioned into movement that actually started feeling better for my body, especially as I was navigating like some autoimmune symptoms of, adrenal fatigue and lots of different digestive issues, and really had to shift the way
Mm,
that I was moving. But I really found Pilates and found different movement that felt good for my body. And I thought that I would like never be motivated to do it at home, and that I always wanted to go into the studio. And then like we didn't really have that choice anymore. And so I really did start to enjoy my workouts at home. And it's nice to have a mix. But I know one thing that you're really passionate about is making exercise accessible for people. And, Pilates can be a more expensive type of movement and exercise, and it's not accessible for everyone. So I'd love for you to speak to that aspect of your app and your mission.
I always was in these workout spaces as an instructor and in the Pilates sphere specifically, where I realized that this was a really exclusive workout. It wasn't, and no judgment on the clients who I worked with, because they were all so badass. I mean, these were women who were in really high up positions. They were waking up at 5 a.m. Like, they were incredible people. And I just want to acknowledge that. But at the same time, I thought there's so many folks out there who can benefit from this movement who don't have that access. And reformer classes are quite expensive. You're looking at about $45 for a drop in. Anywhere here, I live in LA, and that's pretty much the norm across the country. And then if you want to purchase a reformer to have at home, let alone like what that costs. So it could be like anywhere from like $6,000 to $10,000 if you get a decent one. And then you need to hire a trainer to come and work with you, unless you have a certification yourself. So there is just like a massive cost barrier. When I started doing mat workouts, to be honest, the results were so much faster than on the equipment. The equipment was designed for folks who weren't strong enough to do the mat work yet. Joseph Pilates designed it. It looks like a bed, right? The reformer. You're lying down. It's very, there's a lot of, it can be very gentle on your body. There are different ways that people have adapted it now to be more intense. Absolutely. But using your body weight alone can help you get results way faster. Not only that, we can start to recreate the movements from the reformer because they feel so good with really simple tools. So besides just mat Pilates, which classical mat Pilates is pretty strict and rigid, we can also add in very simple props. Even a chair, a wall, a pillow, and a towel can really make a difference. I also like a Pilates ball, a slider, a magic circle, and weights. But I think when I started RPS, I was like, this is going to be a way for me to share this movement that has been really exclusive and expensive, especially classical Pilates, with folks who haven't had access to it before. So that was how it started. And since then, and from day one, it was always important to me that folks knew if they could not afford, my membership is $38 USD per month. And I also acknowledge that that amount is not accessible to everyone. I have a worldwide community and women in different countries and the exchange rates. So what I do is I provide financial assistance and support to anyone who asks. I will never turn someone away. All you have to do is send me an email, tell me what rate feels sustainable for you, and I will honor that rate for you. So I would like to add that in. So it's called the Bad Bee Support Fund. And we even have members who donate to this fund, which is like beyond kind. And regardless of donations that come in, I will always provide this for as long as I'm physically capable of doing so. So yeah, I think the accessibility portion of it is really important to me, close to my heart. And yeah, that's an important aspect for me. Accessible as far as the space and also the financial side.
Yes, I can feel how much that means to you and how important it is. And I love that you have a fund and that some women in your community are supporting other women to be able to do this type of movement. So I love the sisterhood support there. And I believe you also have a community. Is it the Bad Bee community?
Yeah, we call ourselves the Bad Bees, exactly.
I love
And
it.
it's
So
just
good.
this incredible group of the most supportive, awesome people who are all over the world. Um, and yeah, we meet once a month on Zoom and we do happy hours and we get to just like hang out and be human. And we don't do like a movement practice. We just hang out, chat, laugh, share, get to know each other. And then I do some in-person meetups as well. I'm in LA, so not everyone can come to these, but yeah, the community side is really, really special. If you go into my classes or um, programs and read some of the comments, like these are just the coolest people. And it's really nice that I've attracted the people who I have because they're just dream clients. So I'm really grateful for them and shout out to the Bad Bee community. Love y'all.
Amazing. Yeah, it sounds like a really wonderful space that you've created and wonderful clients that you have attracted into your world. So thank you so
Oh,
much for sharing your light and yeah, being so authentic. And I am really excited for our listeners to learn more from you. So where can they find your app? Where can they connect with you?
thank you so much, Amy. So I have an app, but I also have all of my classes and programs on my website as well. But the app is a fun feature that is kind of new. We've had it for about a year and a half now. It's just been awesome. So if you type Ruth Pilates Studio into your app store, whether it's Google Play or iOS, you'll find my app. You can also check out my website, ruthpilatesstudio.com. And please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or via email. My Instagram is also Ruth Pilates Studio. And I am launching a brand new beginner Sensuality series, the Sensulates beginner series. It's starting on Monday the 15th, but it will be evergreen. So anyone can pop in at any time. And I'm really excited about that program. Check it out. I have a podcast called Hot Girl Pilates if you want to listen in a little bit more long form. Yeah,
Yes, so much goodness. Thank you so much.
yeah,
We'll
it's a
be
lot,
linking
isn't
all of
there?
that there, but it's so good. I love following you online too. I love your content. And yeah,
Amy,
I'm
thank you.
excited for everyone to dive in. Yeah,
Oh,
so we'll link
so
everything
sweet. Thank you.
in the show notes for today. And
Fabulous.
yeah, thanks again for being here, love.
You are awesome. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining me here on The Feminine Frequency. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit subscribe and share it with a friend. For more inspiration, empowerment, and wisdom, come on over and follow me on Instagram at Amy Natalie Co. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next video.